Hi everybody, this is Dr. Mack at PacificEastAquaculture.com. I wanted to talk today about Clam Care. I've done some videos like this in the past, but there are always new folks coming into the hobby, and maybe as a refresher for folks that may have seen some of the previous ones. I always get a lot of questions from folks about how to take care of clams, and I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of anecdotal information. You know, someone may have kept one clam and had a certain experience, and then suddenly that gets passed around as the ultimate experience on clam keeping. So just to let you know, we've been in business for 20 years. In those 20 years, we probably have handled several 100,000 clams. In the early years, we had a partner in Tahiti, and I went over there and set up a farm there. And we were originally collecting wild clams, and you can look on YouTube on some of our videos. We had as many as 1,000 of those clams in our facility at a time, and we sold quite a few of those over the years. And eventually our partner there decided to start collecting fish and kind of gave up on the clams, and had some local guys that were collecting them for food, collecting them for the aquarium trade, and that didn't work out too well. So we sort of abandoned the wild clams from French Polynesia, and eventually nowadays we actually bring in the cultured ones from there, and they do quite well. Well, in recent times we have a new partner in Tonga, and we've been getting cultured as well as wild collected clams from him, and he does a great job on collecting, and he's found some really unusual clams like the teardrops and the devil clams and all sorts of weird colors on clams. So basically, nutrition, let's talk about that. Clams need a lot of light. They receive most of their nutrition from the algae, which live in their mantle through photosynthesis. They also utilize dissolved organics in the water, so nitrates and phosphates. So generally they do best in tanks that have a good fish population that are fed pretty heavily, and so they utilize that extra waste from the fish as their nutrition. They don't need to be supplementally fed, and you see a lot of that. Years ago, folks used to think that you needed to put the clams in a little cup every day and put some phytoplankton in there and feed them, and folks actually used to do that, and it's absolutely not necessary. In our facility, I really don't put any type of extra food in. I feed the systems pretty heavily already, but I don't put any food in specifically for the clams. So they don't need to be fed any extra food. Just give them lots of light, and it's like a normal reef tank, and you have a bunch of fish in there and you're feeding them well, you're probably going to have some nitrates and phosphates in there, and they should do well as far as that goes. Another thing, they do get picked on by a lot of different fish, including some traditionally reef-safe fish, and that can include pygmy angels, tangs even have been known to pick on clams, and a lot of that happens initially when the clam is first put in. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe that they have a little bit of slime on them, maybe that sometimes you know, clams are just a natural food item for a lot of fish. So you'll need to watch that. Make sure that nothing is picking on the clam. The clam isn't opening a lot. It may be a sure sign that something is picking on it, and after a while the clam just says, hey, I'm not going to bother to open up again because it just gets picked on all the time. So they need to have something firm under them to attach to. Here I put them on shells. You can see they're on oyster shells or rock rubble, anything that's firm. Here are some of the shells that I use. It's just easy for me to identify them with a number, and you can see it has a concave surface, so it's easy for the clam to sit in there. So you can use shells, you can use rock rubble, you can even put them on your rock work as long as they're not going to fall over, because they are going to open and close before they actually attach. Normally a healthy clam should attach within a couple of days, I would say. Most clams will start to attach immediately, and within a day they're probably attached to whatever substrate they're put on. So let's take a look at just a couple of them here and just see where they're at. They may be in varying stages of attachment. So you can see this one's attached to the shell, and let me try to find one which is not, so I can illustrate something. They're all pretty well firmly attached at this point. Okay, here's one that's not. All right, so this is the so-called foot area, and I get a lot of questions about damage to the foot, torn foot, ripped foot, and most of the time folks send me a photo and the foot is just perfectly fine. So this is what it looks like with nothing attached at all. And I don't know if you could see, but there are fibers which the clam will put out to attach. So let's say if it's attached to a rock or a shell or whatever when I ship it, sometimes they may fall off that. And I'll get folks that'll say to me, hey, it dropped its foot. Is the clam going to die? Well, what actually has happened is these threads you can see here, they look like sort of a gelatinous or thread-like structure that the clam puts out to attach. Sometimes they decide just to drop that and move to a different location, and that's what you often see as far as this so-called dropped foot. It's actually not part of the clam, it's just part of what the clam is using to attach to the substrate. So make sure that they have a nice firm surface of which to attach, either rock rubble, the shell, or anything like that, or if, like I say, if you put them up in the rock work, make sure that they can't fall over before they attach. As far as acclimation, I recommend steady drip acclimation. So this is 1/4 inch hard tubing, basically like you'd have on an RO unit. So start a siphon with it, so one end in the tank or your sump, the other end into a bucket that you have the clam, and then you can get one of these valves at Ace Hardware or Lowe's or Home Depot or something like that, that you can regulate the drip, and you want to have a steady drip, not quite a full stream and not just drip, 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 but almost to the point where the drips turn into like a steady stream, and that should last for about 45 minutes, and then put the clam in the tank. Do not over acclimate. I get folks that'll say to me that, oh, I acclimated the clam for 4 hours and it's looking kind of funny. Yeah, it might if it's been sitting in that little container for 4 hours. So 45 minutes max is all that's needed. So these are cultured clams here. We do a lot of the cultured clams. They tend to be a lot smaller than wild collected. These are about 2 inches. Occasionally they'll range up to maybe about 3 inches. I generally try not to get them in under 2 inches. So at 2 inches, they're perfectly stable, perfectly fine. They do quite well in aquariums. Let's take a look at some of the wild collected ones. They're out here in our greenhouse. The wild collected ones are kept in a different area, separate from the cultured. And again, they're put on rock rubble or shells. These are usually quite a bit bigger, so most of these are about 4 to 6 inches. Those are teardrop clams. These are maximas. Some of these are a little bit smaller, 2.5, 3 inches. There's a Tridacna clam. These are squamosas. Squamosas and Tridacnas are probably the easiest to keep, the hardiest. They don't require quite as intense lighting, and they're a little more forgiving, let's say, than the Maxima clams. Here's some more teardrops, a little bit smaller. These are about 3 to maybe 4 inches. And here again, it's the same type of thing. As far as that foot area, you can see this guy is attached. Not only is it attached to the shell, but also some rock rubble. And here's that little area that had fallen off one of these clams, where folks will say, oh, it dropped the foot. Oops, I just dropped it. Now these are just some of the tissues that it utilizes to attach to a firm surface. You can see it looks like threads. Let me try to get a better view of it. You can see these threads. There's sort of a gelatinous. If you touch it, it kind of sticks to your finger a little bit. And that's all it is. It's just tissue that the clam is putting out to attach. Here you see the Tridacna, same thing. You can see here on the underside, the part of the foot is still exposed. The rest of it's attached to the shell, and you can see some of the threads, some of the fibrous material it's putting out to attach. So again, give them lots of light. As long as you have some nitrates and phosphates in the tank and nothing that's bothering them, generally these clams do really well. They're not that delicate. We usually always have a good selection in stock. The teardrops are definitely something a little more unusual. Every once in a while we get some crazy colored teardrops. Those are definitely rare, or some really crazy colored squamosas, like all blue. There's some of them in here that have a lot of blue in them. It's kind of hard to see the color out